Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Games and Names podcast, a place where we talk with different experts from game dev industry and discuss their experience as well as professional stories. In other words, we focus on games and people in them. My name is Tan. I'm your usual host and also VP of product at AppMagic, an analytical service for analyzing mobile markets and gaining actionable insights. Today we've got a very interesting topic to discuss, and for that we've introduced two experts. So let me introduce them as well. In the left corner, we've got Daniel Ahmad, Director of Research and Insights at Niko Partners, the best provider of games market intelligence on Asia and the Middle East. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you for the welcome, Stan. Great to be here.
And in the right corner, we've got Kirill, the business development specialist from AppMagic. Kirill, glad you've joined us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So guys, first of all, it's really great that we all gathered here today. And to warm up, I want to ask you several questions. And of course, I will answer them as well, just, to get the gears going and also to know each other better. And the next question will be about the passion side. So what drives you? What makes you love this work? Why do you work in this industry? Kirill, I'm really curious about your answer.
Whoa, that's a tough one. Yeah, just making people happy, helping them understand the market better, and making them better versions of themselves. This is always a good driver, a good motivation for me. And so yeah, it's just basically for me, it's helping people understand what they do better. It's always a good thing to do. And I think that's the main kind of a driver for me. So yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I would agree. And I absolutely have that balance in place, I think, between really enjoying digging into all the data that we have, being able to kind of go through just raw data sets and then visualize it as I need to, having that passion for gaming as a whole, getting hands-on with the games, playing them, understanding a bit how they work. And then that third aspect of being able to communicate what I understand or what I've learned from the research I've done to the clients that we work with on a daily basis, and even my team as well. And basically it's all these kind of passions combined together, and it's an ongoing experience for me.
Nice. That sounds really nice. Once again, from my side, I think video games are one of my favorite media. So I really love books, I really love cinema, I love music. And video games is just another type of interacting with the world. And there are some unique type of interactions that are available for video games, and you can't find them in other media. So that's the first one. And secondly, and I think here my teaching experience really just pushes me, I really love being able to explain difficult things, difficult insights with simple language. So there is some kind of a magic in it. And that's what I especially love in my current job. So it's an opportunity to find some interesting things in the numbers, in the graphs, in the stats, taking them out, rebuilding them, and shaping them the way anyone can understand them. I think that's the real magic in the process. So yeah, that was a good intro. And now let us jump to the topic itself. So today we will talk about mobile genres that have been growing steadily despite the overall industry decline. So we've all heard that the industry was going down last year for the first time ever. But there were niches that were growing despite this trend. And we will especially focus on those niches that are not too difficult to enter and doesn't require a crazy amount of resources or expertise, or both maybe. So I think we might call this episode as the most promising genres of mobile games, of mobile niches in 2023, or the niches that you really have to have a look at, because maybe you should develop a game in one of these genres. And I think that's the main focus today will be on casual games and casual genres, because they've got the perfect balance, the sweet spot of risk and success ratio. And Kirill will talk primarily about Western region, while Daniel can share some insights on Eastern markets as well. So without any further ado, let's dig in and start with casual subgenres. I think the first candidate here obviously will be merge 2 games, one of the most interesting, one of the most growing niches right now. Kirill, what do you have to share about merge games?
Yeah, so merge 2 games were just huge in 2021. They went up around 100%, which is just crazy. Well, in general, the gaming market was going down like 5%. Some genres were down 10%. Merge 2 games were up 100%, going from like $7 million, $8 million in revenue per month to $15 million per month, which is crazy.
Wow, it is crazy indeed. So it's like doubling.
Yeah, it's basically doubling. And the best part is it was not driven by a single game or 2 titles. It was mainly new games that came out in 2022 or late 2021. So think games like Chef Merge, or a game like Gossip Harbor, the game like Seaside Escape. They all came out in 2022, and they already like pushing the envelope and just making the market go up, which is always a good sign for any publisher. They're looking at the market, because if you look at, say, I don't want to call names, I don't want to say anything bad about any market, but say match 3 market, you look at this market, and then you see even though it's not going up, it's not going down, it's not going up, it's kind of stagnating, but it's mainly taken by 3-4 titles: Candy Crush, Homescapes, Gardenscapes, and then Royal Match, and nothing's actually happening in terms of like new games breaking in, becoming new success stories. It's pretty static in that sense. But then Merge 2 games, they were like shifting and moving and changing directions all throughout the year, which is always a good sign.
That's great. Daniel, do you have anything to add about merge games on the Asian market?
I think I can mirror a lot of that early conversation around just the fact that it's grown so much between 2021 and 2022. It was really a huge year for merge games overall globally, especially merge 2 games, for example. And so if we look at revenue figures, it was very similar in that there was this doubling again in Asia, especially in the markets that we cover between 2021 and 2022. I think to name drop a few, Merge Mansion, Merge County were probably the 2 that really sort of drove a lot of that growth and performed well, especially in East Asia, Japan, South Korea. That's where we're seeing a lot of the growth being driven initially. And then, we can kind of move into the hybrid conversation as well and look at how merge sort of mechanics are being applied to different titles. Top War would be an example of one that's been operating for some time now. And I think that the genre as a whole is really appealing to not just casual gamers, but gamers that have been able to sort of play mid-core games and get a taste of more complex mechanics. And then having those sort of hybrid titles where merge is being attached to, again, a strategy game in the case of Top War. It's really allowing one sort of those kind of players that have experienced mid-core games to onboard a lot easily while still keeping that casual audience in place. And then 2, I would say that it can help with UA in some capacity, costs, that is UA costs, and that it's a lot easier to find users that are used to, again, that traditional genre with the merge mechanics built on top.
Yeah, actually, on the Western market, we've also seen different hybrid mechanics included in merge games. So I think the very same thing is happening here. So we've already seen different examples of merge with expeditions, of merge with idle tycoons, and we of course will talk about idle tycoons later as well. And also we've seen implementations of merge into match 3 as live ops and events, because it is a very in its core, a very simple yet a very comfortable mechanic to fit into different casual genres. So I guess we will be seeing more and more different hybrid implementations of merge into other games in the future. That's my stake. That's my bet. And also, I want to highlight the Gossip Harbor pod that Kirill mentioned, because we've been digging a lot about merge lately, merge 2 games. And we've seen a very interesting case, because Gossip Harbor was a game released after Love and Pies, one of the most famous titles on the merge 2 in the merge 2 genres. And from the scratch, when you start playing both games, you can see that they're quite the same. They are almost equal, almost clones. Yeah, when you continue, you can see that there is difference in monetization, then there is difference in live ops. So there are not so obvious parts, but on the surface, they're quite the same. And usually, in this case, when there is a clone game that is very similar to the original, it doesn't perform very well. We have seen lots and lots of examples, especially, for example, Archero. It was a great hit 3 years ago. And then there was more than, I think, 60 games like Archero clones. And none of them made it at least as 5% as successful as Archero. And here we can see an example of a successful clone, not just being equally successful, but overcoming the original game. And it is, I think, a unique situation on the market. And later in this episode, we will discuss another example when there appears successful clones of an already existing original. Okay, perfect.
Merge 2, obviously, are very different. And you mentioned that they deployed different mechanics, idle tycoons and everything, journey, expedition. But then they also have very different production approach, I'd say, and they're kind of targeting a very different audience, a lot of them. So you have, on one side, you have, on one spectrum, you have Merge Mansion, you have Love and Pies, and especially with Merge Mansion. So those are huge games that are going for, I'd say, puzzle audience, and they have a very high production cost. I mean, Merge Mansion, the Mandalorian is doing ad for you. That's the level you wanna achieve, right? But then on the other side of the spectrum, you have games like Merge Studio, you have Makeover Merge, you have what else? Yeah, those Loft Paradise. So those are way more simple in terms of production, in terms of gameplay, and they're going for another audience. I feel, well, even more casual, even like somewhere between hypercasual, hybrid casual, that kind of audience. And that shows in their monetization, because the main source of money for them, revenue for them, is ads. And that's apparent if you look at their like revenue and downloads charts. So even within the not so, homogenous merged to games market, you still see different approaches to how you monetize your audience and what is your audience. And yeah, that's all I had to say.
It is true, a very good observation. So we can also say that, talking about hybrids once again, as Daniel mentioned, there are examples of even merge going into the territory of hyper-casual games. So being as simple as almost hyper-casual and having monetization strategy as hyper-casual, with interstitials, with lots of advertising content and not so many in-app purchases. And also, talking about the target audience, we've got a very broad example. There is Medieval Merge, that is a merge game, but for a male audience, with a fantasy RPG, with dragons, with fighting, with your own kingdom that you want to prosper, that you want to defend. So it is another example of merge going very wide. And both from the gameplay perspective, combining different genres, combine different types of niches, and from the audience perspective. And it is interesting. It is really interesting. I think there can be a lot of possibilities here as well. Kirill, while you were talking, you've mentioned Match 3. And yeah, this genre is huge and there is status quo. There are dominating companies in the tops. But if we dig deeper, I think we can see some niches that have an opportunity, that present an opportunity for developers.
All right, yeah, I guess you're referring to Match 3 tile games, which are kind of a subgenre of Match 3, and
Damn, you're
similar
right.
in the naming. Yeah, they're Match 3 games, but they're way more casual, way more simple to make, way more simple in how they look and how they play. And so that was the story of this genre for like the last year, actually. So the whole market started out in like 2020, 2021, around that time. The market came into existence in the form of Match 3D, Match Tile. So those games that actually look like you playing Mahjong, I guess. I've never played that, but you kind of play Mahjong. You just have to select the matching tiles, and that's the whole gameplay. So it's a very relaxing, a casual time where you just idly play this game and you relax, and that's it. Then in 2021, in late 2021, Zen Match came out. The core gameplay was the same. You just match tiles and that's it. But then they added a layer of meta gameplay where you decorate, because that was the rage in 2021, decorating and doing all kinds of stuff. So they added that and instantly became like the market's leaders in terms of revenue, in terms of downloads. They were the household name. When you think about match tile games, you think about Zen Match. And then this year, why we're talking about this market at all, is because another game kind of came out, tweaked the formula, and just took the market by storm. It was Triple Match 3D. So this time they did not play anything. They didn't do anything with the meta gameplay. Instead, they tweaked the core gameplay. So now it's not that relaxing to play. It's not that casual. It's not that simple to play. You have a countdown, so you actually have to complete a level in a certain amount of time. And then you also have missions, so you have orders. Just reminiscing about the merge games which you spoke about. You have orders now, so now you have to fulfill those orders. And the difficult part is you have a countdown. You have to fulfill those orders, and you have a bunch of different visual maps on the screen which you have to go through in order to find your object that you're looking for. So now it's more difficult to play. You can fail, you can lose, you'll have to start again a lot of the time, and that's why they added a boost. They added power ups, they added additional lives, so you can purchase all of that. And obviously, the game's just sitting at just mind-boggling like $10 million per month in revenue, and their RPD of like $11 in Tier 1 West countries, which is again $11 in RPD. Yeah, that's a lot. You can buy a lot of audience. You can compete with like Rail Match at this level of RPD. So it just goes to show how, I don't know, how well they thought out the whole monetization and the whole gameplay process. Especially if compared like to older titles, say Tile Master 3D. This game you do have a countdown, so you have 25 minutes for one level. I mean, my cat would have completed the level in 25 minutes. So it's just that's what they did. That's what they did with the market.
While you were talking, I just had a thought that it's really surprising we haven't seen a battle royale with decorating part of gameplay in 2021, like taking the best from the both worlds of the both trends. By the way, I was thinking, is there a chance that Match 3 tiles as a niche, as a genre, came from the Asian region? Because you've mentioned Mahjong, and I think, the core gameplay is pretty much similar. So, Daniel, do you have any thoughts on that?
Given the similarities to Mahjong, that's one reason certainly why it would appeal more to gamers in that region. And just sort of to back out a bit, and then I'll go back to tile, that tile subgenre in a bit, but what we've generally seen is that Match 3 as a whole, as sort of a super genre, had a mixed year, pretty much across Asia and MENA, last in 2022, that is. There were legacy titles that did perform well, and they were more sort of Candy Crush Saga or Royal Match, for example. They were predominantly doing better in Southeast Asia or South Asia, or kind of less mature markets compared to the more mature markets. The games that did actually do really well in more mature markets were these tile games, match 3 tile games. And so Triple Match 3D being one of them. And so its sort of timer feature, the additional complexity in the game, was one of the reasons why it did so well. And it's one of the broader reasons why a lot of games tend to find success in Asia. They're taking this sort of simple, hyper-casual title, but they're either merging it or sort of having a hybrid genre with something that's more core, or adding in, just on a simple level, more core mechanics, more complex mechanics. And it's appealing to that audience that's really already kind of established themselves as playing mid-core games, while not also alienating the casual gamer base that's there. And so that's generally why we're seeing match 3 tile games actually perform quite well in the East.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for this insight. So yeah, coming back to our casual genres and casual niches, we also mentioned one more niche that I think we should discuss, and I'm talking about idle tycoons. As far as I know, they were not growing so big last year, and not all the titles were successful yet. We want to discuss this niche, and I think, Kirill, you can share why.
Yeah. The reason why is because, like you mentioned, the market did not show a very, promising growth in 2022, especially compared to 2021 and 2022, when the market was just going up constantly, going like double digits every single month. But then this year was more, quiet, more stable, I'd say. Mm-hmm. But then the reason we're talking about this is a lot of new titles came out in 2022, a lot of new idle tycoon games. And a lot of them, and when I say a lot, I mean like maybe 10% of them became, kind of successful. So they actually managed to earn some money to probably be ROI positive. So that's a good thing. And so the main thing for me, that's a good sign. The main thing for me with the whole idle tycoon games is when you look at, say, merge games, you also have say 200 games that came out, 4 of them became successful, and then they all earned, say, millions of dollars, right? And then after that, the fifth biggest game, only earned $200,000. So the drop is very steep, and you're either it's just the formula winner takes it all. Is very it's all about merge 2 games and match 3 games. While here with idle tycoon games, the revenues and I'd say the success is evenly spread throughout the market. So the biggest game makes $3.5 million. The second biggest game make $1.2 million, and then the 12th biggest game on the market makes $400,000. So it's more evenly spread. There's no like steep decline and nothing like that. So even if you're not going to be the biggest game on the market, finding your audience, your core audience, will allow you to make some money and not just be overshadowed by those giants, those 2 or 3 titles that are dominating the market. So that's the biggest and the best thing about idle tycoon games for me, that I think, even though the reward to risk ratio is not the highest, but then the rewards you can actually get some rewards, because if you go to and make a merge 2 game and your game is not successful, you'll make $0. And here you make a game, it's not the most successful game out there, but you'll still be making some money off of that. So, it's better than doing nothing, than making nothing, I mean. So yeah, that's why we are talking about this market at all.
So in the cases when you're developers and you want to play it safe, this is an option that you might want to consider.
I mean, yeah, because we've seen, cases where teams of like 5 people made a successful idle tycoon game in a matter of months. And when I say successful, I mean very successful idle tycoon game in a matter of months. And that's a team of 5 people. So yeah, it's not crazy high production costs or anything.
Yeah, of course, you ought to have some expertise. You have to be professionals. We're not talking about brand new, fresh newcomers out of the university who are dreaming about having a successful mobile game. So I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, these 5 guys, they were super professional. But at the same time, as you've mentioned, you don't need a lot of resources. You don't need a lot of production costs in order to create a very successful game in Idle Tycoon genre. Daniel, what is going with Idle Tycoons in the Asian region? Is it a big thing?
So what is quite interesting is that the genre as a whole hasn't performed as well in Asia as it has in the West. And that's despite the fact that if you look at games like Idle Mafia, for example, which is from Century Games, a Chinese developer and publisher, a lot of the games are developed by Chinese companies or Asian companies. But again, going back to Idle Mafia, 54% of its revenue is from the US. So it is very much a genre that's really taken off in the West. And that's not to say that idle games don't perform well in Asia or that they can't find success there. But I think it goes back to my previous point of when they do find success, it's usually because they have some additional complexity or core mechanics built in that based around like an RPG type of game to begin with. Or they have a theme or art style that fits in with the Asian market. A lot of the games that are really successful in the global market right now within the Idle Tycoon genre generally tend to appeal to Western gamer tastes, and they've usually been designed with that in mind. Whereas we don't really see anything that is specifically designed around a historical or mythological theme that might appeal to gamers in Asia. There's no real kind of cartoon anime style art style that could appeal to gamers in Japan, for example. So I think that's one reason as to why it hasn't really grown there in the same way it has in the West. But then that also represents an opportunity for developers to look at what's making Idle Tycoon games successful currently in the West, what's making idle RPG games or idle games in general popular in the East, and then trying to see how they can develop games within that genre to appeal to the local audiences there.
Sounds good. Actually, sounds like a very big opportunity for both Western and Eastern developers. So, guys out there, if you listen to our podcast, then this is an option for you. All right. And going back to our enumeration of the genres that you really pay attention to this year, there is one more niche, and I can't say that it is a genre of its own, though it is definitely a niche, and it has grown big. And interestingly, it was big both for the Western and Eastern market, as far as I know. And I'm talking about the boom hit and the phenomena of Survivor.io. Survivor has a very, very addictive core gameplay, a very well thought about meta, and pretty good progress. So I'm really wondering what was the success, if there was any, with Survivor and its niche. I'm talking about clones of Survivor in the Eastern market. Daniel, do you have any info on that?
Yeah, the game has absolutely been a huge hit in Asia as a whole. I think if we look at the 14 markets that we cover, that includes MENA as well, the revenue generated by that game last year is over 70% in those 14 markets. So just on the face of it, this is a hugely successful game. I think China is probably the largest market for revenue. I'll have to double check. But what's interesting is that they really kept sort of that simplicity and casual gameplay that they're known for developing in the past, with Archer, for example. And then they've really added on top these light roguelike elements and additional, again, some complex elements, but it's been done in such a way that really the onboarding experience is really great for both casual and mid-core players. And that core experience has really kept players engaged and in the game over the long term. So I think, first point, Survivor.io, huge in Asia already, and it's really building up the survival arena sort of genre as a whole. And then I think what's interesting as well is that if you just look at Survivor.io on its own as a casual game, it is one of the top casual games by revenue in Asia right now. So it really is dominating not just within its own subgenre, but within the overall sort of casual game genre as a whole. And then, not to be kind of repeating myself over and over, but it really does go back to the fact that they've been able to use these more advanced mechanics, right, within this simple concept to provide a somewhat more complex and more core experience. And that is what also helps it perform really well in Asia.
Mm-hmm. So for the Asian region, at least, it's once again the story not of simplification, but rather going more difficult, more intricate, and thus being more successful in the end.
It doesn't always need to be more difficult, which is obviously not the case in this game. But it's more a case of having multiple types of gameplay elements or layers on top of the game that players can engage with as they see fit. And what we found is that players in Asia are more receptive to basically all these different game modes or different ways of playing or different mechanics. And that is more likely for them to, those elements are more likely, make it more likely for them to stick with the game over the long term.
Sounds reasonable. Kirill, what was going on with Survivor and its hitness on the Western market?
I mean, you know the story. It just took off. Everyone was playing it. Everyone was talking about it. And a lot of people are still playing the game because it's addictive. It's fairly complex. It's fairly deep and thought out. So, well, the story is it's a huge success. It's a huge game. I think it's more successful already than Archero, I guess so. But it will definitely be more successful.
As far as I remember,
Archero.
yeah. Especially like thinking about the time period, Archero had 3 years to run, and then Survivor was released last summer, I suppose. So less than a year. And during this time, I think they almost are equal in their in-apps revenue. Not talking about advertising revenue, of course, but from this perspective, yeah, it is more successful, definitely.
Yeah. And then you obviously have some, other titles trying to imitate their success and play off of their success. You have someone like Lonely Survivor, Heroes versus Hordes. Those games were fairly successful, obviously not on par with Survivor.io. That game was in the league of its own. But those games, were fairly successful, a couple $100,000 per month, which is a good result. But yeah, in my opinion, the story is always the same. You have Archer, you have Survivor.io, and a lot of developers try to, emulate their success, try to, build off of that. And no one actually manages to overshadow them or even get close to the initial game success ever. So yeah, the story is always the same.
That's been the case with this, for sure.
I'd say that in the case of Survivor, though with the clones, the situation was a bit different. So with Archero, we've seen that lots and lots of clones were released, especially when Archero peaked itself, and none of them were really successful. But with Survivor.io, for example, you were talking about Lonely Survivor, and right now it gains like maybe 10% of a monthly revenue of Survivor.io, which of course is a small part, but at the same time, none of the Archero clones even made it to this point. Okay, I think, gentlemen, we've covered the casual genre, and we pretty much discussed a lot of insights and valuable information for the developers out there. So let us try to talk a little bit about hyper-casual genres and about core games as well.
Yeah, should we start with like hyper-casual games or core games? Whichever you like, guys.
Let's go with hyper-casual first. So let's go first simplify it and then go in fully into the core.
All right. So not going into a lot of details, a lot of numbers and everything. Hyper-casual games were down in terms of downloads, obviously, if you do not take developing countries into consideration. So Western countries, downloads were down, revenues were obviously, no, not actually. Revenues were up, actually. And that's because, as we've seen today with a lot of different genres, like Merge 2 and whatever, the main story of the whole genre, the whole market, the hyper-casual market was hybrids and hybrid gameplays, hybrid mechanics, and whatever. You have a whole genre pop up called hybrid casual, which incorporates the hyper casual production approach and assets and everything. It looks like a regular hyper casual game. It is advertised as a regular hyper casual game, but then you end up sinking hundreds of hours into the game because it is very complex. It has a lot of depth to it. It's a very actually a big. Those are big games. I'm talking about something like My Little Universe. So those were the first. They were the first game to actually do that, as far as I know. My Little Universe. So it's called Idle Arcade. So it's still a hyper casual game, but then you can actually purchase stuff. You have some purchases in the game, which is awesome. And just you play it as a usual game. You grind your way to victory. You have different worlds. You have different dimensions, and it had different mechanics even. So one mechanic is you just dig through stuff. You mine some resources, but then you can also fight. You can also upgrade your weapons and your armor and everything. So it's fairly complex, and that's why the revenues of the market were up, because a lot more publishers and games started implementing the in-app purchases in their games. And that's, from what I've heard and from what I heard from people in the industry, this is going to be the future for hyper casual games as we know it. So they will try to get more casual. It's not going to be hyper casual anymore. It's going to be super casual or a lightly bit less casual, something like that. It's not going to be hyper casual anymore because it doesn't work anymore.
So it seems like we will end up somewhere in between, because of the casual games going down and simplifying, and hyper casual games going up, and somewhere in between, apparently they will meet.
Well, yeah, we'll see about that. The only difference you'll see right now is obviously the visuals. So hyper casual games, they're still using those assets that you can think of, low poly and everything. And casual games that tend to have more art style, more class to them. So yeah, that's the big difference as of right now.
One of the ways to tell them apart.
Yeah.
What was going with the hyper casual games on the Eastern market?
Good question. I think that the journey the hyper casuals take has been quite interesting, because we saw the initial growth, then the skepticism around it, and then with COVID-19, obviously there was this huge boost in just downloads across the board, which hyper casual really benefited from. And we're now in 2023 or 2022 to look back, seeing the kind of decline post-COVID as we return to normalization, but then also the impact from Apple exchanges, right, with IDFA. And so if you look at 2022 overall in Asia and MENA, the 14 markets that we look at specifically, revenue and downloads were down over 50% year over year, both for both across revenue and downloads. And so, yes, we continue to see this ongoing shift towards mid-core games or sort of hybrid games. Yes, we continue to see competition even from outside gaming, like short video platforms, kind of take time away from hyper casual to some extent. And what is remaining of hyper casual is games that launched a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, as opposed to something that really came out in 2022 and was a huge hit. And so, yes, I would echo obviously what Kirill said, in that we are seeing this shift towards in-app purchases or hybrid monetization being used in hyper-casual games just across the board in order to increase monetization within those games. And I think that is ultimately what we'll see happen a lot more, especially in Asia, where, again, going back to my previous point, the addition of those sort of more complex mechanics and hybrid monetization elements is a lot more accepted and leads to greater engagement in those games.
It's really interesting. You've mentioned competitors among short video platforms like TikTok, as far as I've heard, because as far as I know, right now, hyper casual games, they look for the trends on the TikTok primarily, and they try to use it for their user acquisition. So making games like shave the beard, pop the pimple, I don't know, or organize the stuff in your kitchen. You've definitely seen it. Or maybe cut the soap, maybe make some kind of a sculpture. Yeah. So all of these were TikTok trends, and they were used by hyper-casual games. So it's pretty funny that it's going vice versa right now, with these short video platforms competing with hyper-casual games for the same audience.
It's this interesting dynamic where you have viral success stories that you'll see from hyper-casual games that really perform well on short video platforms like TikTok, both through just general ads, but also through influencers or creators playing those games as well. But at the same time, there is this element where whenever we've been conducting a survey over the past few years, and you say, okay, well, where are you actually spending your time relative to gaming and beyond? The amount of time being spent within short video applications like TikTok is ever increasing, whereas casual and hyper casual to some extent, and again, this is only in Asia more so, is seeing a slight decline. So it's very hard to say exactly whether people are staying within TikTok and whether mini games in the future, for example, would address that, like it has in China to some extent. But the overall trend is that more time in short video, less time in hyper casual.
That's a really good insight. Thank you for that, Daniel. I never knew it, so it's a really good one. All right, so we've covered casual, we've covered hyper casual, and I think that's the best time to go for core. I think.
Oh yeah,
Kirill, if you may.
Yeah, it was not the best year for core games, even though a lot of huge titles came out that year. It was Diablo, was Marvel Snap, Apex came out that year. So it was, on the surface, it looks like it was a good year for the gaming, for the core gaming in general. But if you look at the numbers, look at the graphs, it was all going down in downloads and revenue in any country, especially in like tier 1 West countries. And that's, that has to do with a lot of reasons, a lot of factors. One of them being the ATT, IDFA deprecation, everything. It's harder to get traffic, to buy traffic right now, just because you cannot target this very specific target audience. Because with casual games, your potential audience is kind of everyone and anyone. And with core games, obviously not everyone will play a strategy game or RPG game or whatever. So you have to be very careful of what you are going for and who you're targeting. And that became almost impossible with like the ATT and stuff. And then more general reasons are obviously just the economic downturn, turmoil, and recession, and people are just not willing to spend as much as they used to that year. So those are the main reasons why the market was going down. Even though, a couple of good games came out and everyone loved them. People are still playing Diablo. People are still playing Marvel Snap. People are not playing Apex because EA closed it. But they're still playing those games. Yeah, it was a good game.
From what I'm hearing right now, it seems that for the core niche, if you want to go there, you need a very strong IP. So Diablo, Marvel Snap, even Apex, all of them were based on a very big IP that was popular before the mobile game. And of course, I think that's part of the success.
Certainly is. It certainly helps with the user acquisition. Having an IP to back you up, it's always a help. So yeah, it is true. Like having Nick Fury playing someone in your ad is a big thing. Yeah. So Daniel, I'm really curious. Is the same thing was going on the Eastern market? So the IP-based games were going strong, but all the rest wasn't so big.
Yeah, I think that trend is very true for the Asia and MENA markets as a whole. I think what's interesting is that, yes, there's the global macroeconomic environment. Yes, there's Apple's IDFA changes. But also, if you look at China, for example, in a very specific way, regulatory changes there were also one of the reasons as to why the market declined as it did. And so when we look at some specific markets in Asia in depth, really it's the compounding of multiple negative factors that led to the decline in revenue that we saw. And then if we shift our focus and look at some of the more developing markets like India, for example, or Egypt even, what's actually interesting is that they saw on a combined level a growth in revenue, mobile game revenue that is. And India right now is still the fastest growing market that we track for mobile games. And so we expect that to continue growing. So it really was more so the mature markets like Japan, China, for example, where we saw the largest declines. But then in these developing markets, there was a lot of growth still to be had overall. If I look at China specifically, and we look at the new games that launched in 2022 and how successful they were, pretty much all of the top games that launched in 2022 were based on an IP of some kind. So Diablo Immortal launched from Blizzard and NetEase in the country. Microsoft and Tencent released Return to Empire, which is their Age of Empires game. Riot Games and Tencent also released a esports manager game based on the League of Legends IP. And those performed extremely well compared to other new games which didn't have an IP and were in core genres. And then I can also look, for example, to South Korea. It's the same thing again. The core genres, particularly RPG games, that really performed well were all based on the Lineage IP, which is a really popular RPG, MMO IP there. And then also Dungeon Fighter from Nexon released a new mobile game that performed really well. So no matter which market I go to, if I look at the top sort of 5 or 10 grossing games that are core genre games, pretty much all of them have an IP attached. And that has really been a secret over the past year as to how to succeed in these markets within the core genre.
So it's both having a good, strong IP and targeting for the development regions. So these two can be something that will help with your success for going to the mid-core.
Yeah, it's not to say that non-IP based games can't succeed. They certainly can. But when we look at sort of the differences in revenue and downloads, having an IP based game certainly gives an advantage over a non-IP based game.
And it is totally understandable. I think, it is very predictable, but still, it is good to know. Right. I think we've covered all the main trends, all the main genres, and we've shared lots of useful insights. So thank you for that. I'm pretty sure anyone listening to us right now will have a better understanding of which niches to look at in this year and maybe in upcoming years as well. And I've got one last question. This is one question that I am going to ask all of our guests on this podcast. So can you recommend 3 games? These can be any games, mobile, PC, console, I don't know, Tetris, so whatever you like, and maybe a small description why you think they are worth it. Kirill, if you're ready, if you're up for a challenge, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Let me just think. Well, the first one should probably be T3 Arena because I played it a lot. So it's a shooter. It's a mobile game. It's kind of an Overwatch, but for mobile, it's awesome. It's fun. It's easy to play. It's easy to get into. It's easy to spend hundreds of dollars into. So yeah, it's overall a good game. Recommend playing it. And it's not widely, talked about. So maybe more people will play that. And yeah, just the developers will get more money. Next up would probably be, a very different game. It's called Into the Breach. It was recently added to the Netflix games libraries. And now it's available on phones and iPads and everything. So that's a turn-based tactical strategy, I'd say. So you play as the mechs and you fight off alien insects things. So yeah, it's just, you can kind of play chess, but it's just looks better and it's more entertaining. And then one more is just the game I recently played. It's called Resident Evil. It's the first game, the first entry in the series. It came out in 1996, and it's just mind blowing how difficult the game is and how different it is from like the gameplay and game design point of view. Because other games that came out in 96 include games like Super Mario 64. It includes like Quake and stuff. And then you have Resident Evil, where you have limited inventory space and you have to have an ink paper to save your progress. So it's just crazy now. Playing it now is crazy because you're used to like more casual experience where you can just quick save anytime you want. But in here, you have to have a thing in your inventory just to save a game, which is just, whoa. So yeah, those are the games I'd recommend playing.
Sounds great. Actually, I've never known this fact about Resident Evil, the first one in the series, in the franchise. I'm really waiting for Resident Evil 4 remake to come up this year, because that's one of the original games that I've played, Resident Evil 4. So having big hopes for that one. All right. Daniel, what about you?
I'll probably look at two games that I think are important for anyone in the industry to play. The first one being Marvel Snap. It did really well as a collectible card game last year from Second Dinner, which is a US-based games company, I think, and published by ByteDance and Nuverse, who are Chinese. And so it's interesting to kind of see how that game has been able to simplify the mechanics for mobile compared to traditional collectible card games or trading card games, and the monetization elements in that as well. And it's also interesting to see what Second Dinner will do next, but also what ByteDance will do next in terms of their gaming strategy and entering the gaming space, given their huge position with TikTok already in sort of the short video space. The second game, and maybe this isn't really a game, but I would say any extraction shooter or extraction kind of looter game. Arena Breakout is one that comes to mind from Tencent. Again, Chinese developed game. And this is because it looks like everyone is trying to create this going forward. And a lot of people are betting on this being the next Battle Royale type of genre where, it really takes off and becomes a genre within its own. And so Arena Breakout is one that's come out last year in China. It's done fairly well and sort of setting a standard. Escape from Tarkov, of course, being one of the original in that genre. And there is, from most major publishers, a slate of extraction shooter games set to come out over this year. And I think playing those now will give people a good idea of what to expect. And then the third would be just a personal game, a personal favorite, which is Wolong, Fallen Dynasty, that came out. It's a Koei Tecmo RPG game based on the Three Kingdoms period. And this is more to do with my fascination with history and mythology and, in this case, Chinese history. And so I've always been a fan of that type of game, but also the story and the historical elements behind it. And I've been playing it, and it's good. I would say there's a few things I'd certainly improve. But for me, it's more about the story and the history and the theme and the way it kind of all comes together.
Fun fact here: Daniel's Twitter handle is Zhuge Liang, right? Is that the name of the guy?
Yeah.
Which is a history-based character. It's not a character; it's an actual person. He was like I don't even know. He was everything. He was like the inventor of stuff. He was the war commander. He was the governor, and he's just very famous in like Chinese history and had Chinese literature and everything. He was the big picture, the big guy for Chinese history.
Yeah.
So yeah,
sounds like
a fun fact. I just learned that recently. Yeah.
And so the game that I'm playing, Wolong Fallen Dynasty, is pretty much based around that exact time period and characters and people, which is again why I'm interested in playing it.
Sounds good. I think I should try it. I've seen it on Game Pass. So
Yes,
I should definitely give it a try.
It's free to play on Game Pass.
Oh, that is
Good
nice.
for you guys.
God save the,
Good for you guys.
Yeah, so going for me, I think my first recommendation will be a mobile as well. And I'll go for Wild Rift. So this is the game we definitely have a love-hate relationship with. I think I download it like each half a year. I play for a week, like fully in hours and hours of playing. And then I delete it with some kind of a thought that, yeah, maybe I should try drugs instead, because at least there is a higher possibility that I will end up more healthy. But I really loved League of Legends back in the day. So when I was in the university playing with my friends, lots of hours spent, good times. And I always wondered why they haven't released it on mobiles. And then growing up, working in the gaming industry, seeing all the difficulties inside the process, all the interactions with the UX, UI, I came to a thought, yeah, now I know why they didn't. And they made it. And the most surprising part for me was that the way it is customized for mobile controls, for mobile platform, is just perfect. So it is unbelievable how they've managed to basically give you the same experience, the same feel on absolutely different platform. And at least I think from this perspective, if you work in the game development industry, you should try the game. So that's the first one. The second one should be Outer Wilds. So this is, I can't say it's an oldie, but it's definitely not a brand new title. I think Outer Wilds was released 4 years ago, maybe 5. But it is one of the best games I've played ever in my life, with a very exploration-based narrative. And at the same time, the story goes with a scientific hint. So it's a story about going through the space, about exploring different planets, different forms, and unveiling what has happened. And I think one of the first very important thing about this game is that it is like an onion. So there are layers, and you can beat it in your first try. Basically, there is no progress. There is no things that you will you will enhance in your hero or your abilities. It's just your knowledge. If you know what is going on, if you know where to go and what to do, you will make it. And the game itself is just the same. You just know more layers of it, and you know how to beat it. And secondly, I really love that the plot itself, it's very humanistic. So it's very kind and nice, and it's very emotional at the same time with a scientific approach. So it's a very rare thing when you can combine, on the one hand, something very scientific, very with a cold mind and numbers, and at the same time something very emotional, something very irrational, and something that is very close to all of us. And that is why I recommend this game to everyone who I meet, basically. So sorry guys, you got under fire. And the third one, I think I'll go with Inmost. So it's not a very popular game. It's a game that was released in Apple Arcade a couple of years ago, but it has a very distinctive visual style. So it's pixel based, but with Lovecraftian motives, which is quite unique. And I know for sure that this game was developed by a very small team, maybe of several members, maybe a couple of people there. So when you play this game, you can keep that in mind. The game is very small itself, but it is very interesting, very captivating, and I really love the art style. So that will be my third recommendation as for now for today. So I think that's all with our first episode. To all of you listening to us, thank you for getting to this point. Kirill, Daniel, I really appreciate you coming today and joining us for the first episode ever. It's a big thing, so thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I really hope that we will be able to have another talk in the future. And to all of you out there, see you the next episode. Take care and bye.